Welcome, focused learners, to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here with us today because, well, we're finally going to decode one of the most frustrating human experiences of all time. We are going to unpack the biological reasons why we constantly fail to act on our own best intentions. Exactly why you might be watching this right now instead of, say, doing your laundry. But more importantly, we're going to learn how to actually hack our own neurology to overcome it. We're talking procrastination, executive function, and the whole anatomy of inaction. Let's get into it.
Let me ask you a highly relatable question to kick things off. Why on earth do we ignore our own to-do lists? I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You literally write down your top 3 priorities for the day, you know they're super important, you have the time to actually do them, and yet you find yourself doing literally anything else. Reorganizing your desk, aimlessly scrolling social media, or suddenly deciding your kitchen needs a deep clean right this very second. So why do we stall when we know exactly what we need to do?
Okay, let's dive into this, because this massive gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it, it's not some modern personal failure. You certainly aren't the first person to experience it. It's actually this ancient human puzzle. The ancient Greeks even had a specific word for it, akrasia. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato debated this very concept, the state of acting against your own better judgment. Think about it. If you know action A is the absolute best choice, how is it physically possible to intentionally choose action B? Well, it turns out the answer is hardwired right into our biology.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to start with the mystery of akrasia, then dive into the actual neuroscience of stalling. From there, we'll get highly practical, hacking task initiation, resetting your dopamine, and finally, building systems that beat out your finite willpower.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the mystery of akrasia.
To actually solve this, we really need to completely reframe how we view procrastination. For decades, society has basically told us that avoiding our work is just a character flaw. We slap the label laziness on it, and it becomes this heavy weight of guilt we carry around. But actually, scratch that. In reality, what most of us are experiencing is executive dysfunction. This is a very real cognitive difficulty in planning, initiating tasks, and shifting attention. It isn't a lack of moral fiber, guys. It's a physiological response that's often tied to things like ADHD, severe burnout, sleep deprivation, or just chronic stress. Your brain's command center is simply overwhelmed.
So the crucial point is really captured perfectly by researcher Timothy Peichel. He says, procrastination is an emotion regulation problem, not a time management problem. When a task feels frustrating, boring, or mildly threatening, our brains prioritize short-term mood repair. We avoid the task to escape the bad feeling right now, but that just creates a vicious cycle of avoidance and guilt, which honestly just makes the task feel even more dreadful tomorrow.
Moving right along to Part 2, the neuroscience of stalling. And this brilliantly illustrates the biological villains holding our best intentions hostage. Because now that we've removed the guilt, we need to look at the literal tug-of-war happening inside your skull. On one side, you have the prefrontal cortex. That's your logical, goal-directed planning center. It needs dopamine to run. On the other side, you have the amygdala, your primitive threat assessment center. And get this, brain scans reveal that chronic procrastinators have a measurably stronger neural threat response. The amygdala literally flags a boring spreadsheet as a physical threat and hits the override button. It completely shuts down your action planning center before you even consciously realize what's happening. No way, right?
Now you've absolutely felt this override happen. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio calls this a somatic marker. It's that sudden wave of physical tension, that tightening in your chest or that subtle gut dread you feel the literal second you open a difficult project file. Your body is sending a massive emotional alarm signal that biases your brain toward avoidance, and it happens fractions of a second before your rational mind can even jump in to analyze the consequences of slacking off.
And for those with ADHD, this internal battle, it's on extreme mode. Standard productivity advice, like just write a list and do it, fails spectacularly here. Why? Because the ADHD brain actually has naturally low baseline levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. Their prefrontal cortex autopilot is super unreliable without those chemicals. To even turn the ignition, the brain requires high-interest or completely novel stimuli to create a dopamine spike. Add to that something called time blindness, where the brain physically perceives the passage of time differently, and you can easily see why standard calendars and to-do lists are essentially useless.
Which brings us to Part 3, hacking task initiation. Let's speed things up and talk solutions.
So, if our biology is totally rigged against us, how do we bypass that initial resistance? Well, the most effective hack for getting started is Mel Robbins' famous 5-second rule. It's incredibly simple. Step 1. Notice the impulse to do a worthwhile task. Step 2. Immediately count backward out loud. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Step 3. Move your physical body on 1. Why does this actually work? Because counting backward isn't a default pattern. It forces the prefrontal cortex to wake up and activate, actively disrupting the amygdala's threat sequence. And the physical movement? That is the ultimate commitment device. By just standing up or opening the laptop, you physically change your state before your brain can formulate a single excuse.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a complete framework called the launch and orbit method. That 5-second countdown is your launch. It gets you off the launch pad. But to stay in the air, you need the burn phase. You just commit to working for a tiny 2-minute micro-commitment. That drastically lowers the brain's resistance threshold. Finally, the orbit phase. Set an if-then intention to pre-plan your response to distraction. Like, if I feel the urge to check my phone, then I will write 3 more sentences first. You automate your follow-through, so you aren't relying on sheer willpower in the heat of the moment.
Okay, part 4, resetting your dopamine. Even with great tactical habits, we really have to look at the macro environment and see how our daily lives actively hijack our natural reward circuitry. I mean, our modern world is basically built like a giant digital casino. Social media platforms, dating apps, video games, they all use slot machine mechanics, specifically variable rewards. You never know exactly what you're going to get when you pull to refresh, which creates this intense anticipation. Add in constant smartphone notifications, hyperpalatable sugary foods, and frictionless online shopping, you are artificially flooding your brain with intense bursts of dopamine all day long. And here's the kicker. When your baseline is artificially bumped that high, sitting down to write a boring email feels physically painful.
So this is where the concept of a dopamine detox comes into play. Now, to be clear, a complete biological fast from dopamine is literally impossible. Your brain is always making it. But taking a strategic break from these highly stimulating behaviors can profoundly reduce your stress and recalibrate your reward system. By just taking scheduled tech breaks, replacing doom scrolling with low-stimulation hobbies, and turning off those notifications, you allow your brain's receptors to reset. And suddenly, less intense activities, like reading a book or finishing a work project, become engaging again.
And that leads us to our final section, Part 5, Systems over Willpower.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we completely externalize our executive functions, because we know we can't rely on our brain's unpredictable autopilot. The goal is to build specific neuro-inclusive productivity stacks tailored to how your unique brain works. For example, if working memory is your struggle, build an external brain stack. Offload everything into a single inbox. Use physical visual timers to cure that time blindness, and try body doubling, which is just working alongside someone else for social accountability. If you're chronically bored, become a dopamine engineer to gamify your habits and inject novelty into dry tasks. And if distractions derail you, be an environment architect. Automate your website blockers and use continuous brown noise. It occupies the scanning, distractible part of your brain so the rest of it can actually focus.
And for those of you who want cutting-edge data rather than guesswork, there is the biofeedback loop stack. Look, we are notoriously bad at self-reporting our own focus levels. Technologies like the Neurosity Crown, which is an 8-channel EEG device, actually solve this by objectively measuring your real-time theta to beta brainwave ratio. Instead of wondering if you're focused, you have the hard data. The tech can even adapt your background music in real time to gently pull your brain back into a deep state of concentration the literal moment it detects your attention slipping. Talk about the ultimate external executive function.
So we've covered a lot today. The ancient philosophy of acrasia, the neuroscience of the amygdala hijack, and exactly how to build external systems that work with your neurology, not against it. You no longer have to label yourself as lazy. You have the blueprint now. So I'll leave you with this provocative challenge. Take a hard look at your to-do list. What is one task you can count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and start the moment this explainer ends? Stop thinking, start counting, and go build your momentum. Catch you next time.